A few years ago, there was a Special Olympics event, a World Games, and there were 5,000 athletes down on a field. And the President of the United States came, and there were 80,000 people in the stands. And this was before your time, so people had cameras. The parents will remember cameras. They were these little boxes you could get at the grocery store, and you pushed a button, and you took a picture, and then you got it developed. So all the athletes had cameras. They were on the field, 5,000 of them. And when President Clinton, went to speak, he spoke from the top of the stadium, and one of the professional photographers down on the field saw a group of the athletes. And they were trying to get a picture of the president, 8 or 10 of them. He wasn't sure where they were from. There were 130 countries represented there, and he noticed that they all had their cameras up to get a picture of the president, but the cameras were all backwards. The lens was directed at the nose of the athletes, and the photographer realized they were wasting all their film and went over and said, "You're trying to get a picture of the president." And the athlete gestured, and he said, "You have to turn the camera around and look through the viewfinder and then push the button." And the athlete said, "Oh, thank you so much. But if you hold the camera backwards and look through the viewfinder, it works like binoculars, and you can see the president perfectly clearly at the top of the stadium." You see, the photographer was a good guy, but he got the situation wrong. He had the wrong brand. He saw through a lens of deficit, of disability, and those lenses led him to assumptions. They're weak, and I'm competent. Most importantly, what he saw through that lens was not accurate. This is the story of how millions and millions of people with intellectual disabilities have suffered for hundreds of years at the hands of most of us who don't count ourselves amongst their number. A label leads to being named as a difference, misunderstood. Misunderstanding creates marginalization, institutionalization, and worse, all because of a misread based on bad branding. Marginalization and oppression come from the wrong lens. We have separated each other, and this is one of the great bad habits of humanity. And I'm here to invite you today, through the experience and hearts and minds of the athletes of Special Olympics, and if you can hold them in your heart even for a few minutes today, to challenge your assumptions as you leave here and to take from here a willingness, I dare say a commitment, to break with labeling and stigmatizing and demonizing other people, especially other Americans in your own country, which is so divided today. We gather in a backdrop of, in many ways, great sadness around us. We are constantly reminded, whether recently in the horrific tragedies in Buffalo, the war in Ukraine, or even our own history here on the hilltop, of our complicity with, our support for slavery. We can recognize in all of these this same pattern. One group takes the other group, demonizes them, diminishes them, and has an excuse for violence and aggression and marginalization. And I would like to invite you to recognize that that formula of othering is too often missed in our own consciousness as we face our own futures. To me, this is more than a political crisis you are entering. It's more than an economic crisis, although we have those dimensions of our experience. It is also a spiritual crisis. And you have been trained here, perhaps better than any community of young men and women in history, to bring both the power of your minds and the strength of your spirit to bear to help support, save, and transform a country facing a spiritual crisis. So here's what I think. Here's what I think we can learn from those athletes with their makeshift binoculars. Let's try to change the way we see. Let's try to change the mindset that created the contempt and often hatred that too often dominates the country in which you are now assuming leadership roles. So I can hear you saying, oh yeah, that's all nice. That's good. Years ago, Desmond Tutu, the late, great Archbishop of South Africa, who lived the horrors of apartheid, who lived the horrors of the brutal injustices and violence of that regime, was asked, and I was in the audience, and someone said, Archbishop, don't you have to admit that evil is more powerful than good? Because in the back of many of our minds, we're worried that that's the case. And he had this beautiful smile. I won't imitate his accent. And he flashed his smile. No, evil is not more powerful than good, he said. But it's better organized. So my invitation to you is to recognize that these buildings that have surrounded you have been organized for good. For your good, for the good of your hearts and your minds, and the good of the world around you. If we're trying to figure out what it will take to organize for good, I say take the Georgetown mindset, take the cura personalis, take the magis, and take it seriously into the world in which you live. Now, I have one rule of thumb that you might want to try to apply as you try to create the new mindset our country needs. But I'm not going to tell you it's original. I consider it the greatest peace and justice strategy never tried. It's called love your enemies. Now, I know, naive, right? I don't know about you, but if I was back there editing the Gospels in 66 AD, I might have said to Matthew, you know, no disrespect, pal, but love your enemies, it's a bit much. I think you're going to lose people. I mean, I know Jesus said it, but he didn't have a publicist. And you know, he went off sometimes. He got radical, and you get radical, people don't listen. So I suggest, Matthew, just stick with do not kill. It's a really good one. Moses had it. Sinai had it. It's been around for a long time. No one complains about it. I suggest you edit out love your enemies. Well, I wasn't there to make the edit, so they put it in. And here we are 2,000 years later, and a lot of time we just laugh at it. People think, love your enemies, that's for saints, that's for Ignatius. And even more, it's really not for the hard-edged reality I live in. I can hear some of you saying, look, I want action, I want change, I refuse to abide injustice, and I agree. Frederick Douglass said power concedes nothing without a demand, and I agree. And injustice is in our country, and we need to end it, and I agree. And there are those of you who are saying, where are the values, where's the fight for the heart and soul of this country? I agree. Nothing about love your enemies says you shouldn't fight for justice, you shouldn't fight for equity, and you shouldn't work for peace. But it does say you will not get there with hatred and contempt. You will not win the battles which your generation must win for our country with hatred and contempt for your fellow countrymen and women. We don't just need... I don't believe we just need critics, but we also need creators. I don't believe we want more people who humiliate one another. We need people who want to heal one another. We don't need voices of shame and scorn who use the guise of telling the truth to shield us from the venom of hate. We need change, meaningful, heartfelt, serious, compassionate change of the whole. That's the lesson I've learned from people on the margins and people who are often forgotten, the athletes of Special Olympics, and I hope that's the lesson you've learned in this university. Now, you don't have to love everybody by saying you like them. And you don't have to love everybody by saying you agree with them. In fact, that's not even desirable. But you do have to commit to the energy field, the consciousness, the openness of love in order to unlock the anger and the hostility and the injustice of oppression. I don't believe that love your enemies is any longer a strategy for saints. I believe it is the new requirement for citizenship. So, I know some of you are saying, well, I'm not a Christian, and some of you are saying, I'm not religious, and that's fine. I'm not suggesting a dogmatic conviction. I'm suggesting a transformation of the heart. I'm suggesting that the best in religion teaches us a consciousness of love, an openness to others, a lack of judgment, a willingness to listen, a compassion for the entire human family, and those dimensions of all religions are needed now more than ever. And if you think to yourself, well, yeah, but there's evil in the world, and yeah, but there are examples where it wouldn't have worked. I say that's not evidence that it doesn't work. I say it's evidence we should have started earlier. So if you'll consider this kind of crazy message on your graduation, it's pretty simple. You can remember it anyway. I want to let you know you will be mocked. You will be dismissed. You'll be told you're naive. You'll get to big businesses and big organizations and NGOs, and you'll be told that's not realistic. That's the thinking that's landed us where we are. We need rebels with a new strategy. So here's what I suggest as a few rules of thumb to guide you from the athletes of Special Olympics. First, if you want to be open to others, you can't do it with your head, you have to do it with your heart. So practice. Practice every day something that opens your heart. In our tradition, one of the great saints says, God's first language is silence. I suggest practice opening your heart every day with silence. Second, get help. We're all struggling. Get therapy. Get a coach. Get a spiritual director. Getting help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of bravery. It's a sign of being smarter than the rest of us who are afraid of it. Put up a sign on your refrigerator. One of the skills we teach kids is called help-seeking skills. I have a sign that says help seeking. Go get the help you need. Third, take a chance. I know a lot of us have written off others. You've decided they're hopeless. You've named them as the problem. Don't give up on the human spirit. Take a chance. Cross divides. This is what the Special Olympics athletes do every time they walk in front of you to run their race. They take a chance on you. They take a chance on all the forces that have said no to them. All the places they've been called names, all the times they've been labeled and mislabeled, and they run their race and they put their arms up and they say, I'm taking a chance on you again. Give me a chance. See me. I don't need you to welcome me. I need you to join this world. So I exhort you now, in this moment, don't give up on those people you've put away. Finally, tell the story. We don't have to wait for the news anymore. Everybody here has, maybe you don't have Facebook anymore, but you've got Instagram, or you've got, I won't go through all the dating apps, but you've got them. Tell the story. Don't fall into the contempt trap. It's easy to tell the story of contempt. It's easy to repost something outrageous, hateful, egregious. Be storytellers of the surprising gifts you discover in others that no one expects you to recognize or see. I encourage you to brand Love Your Enemies. Make it famous on your social channels. It'll have much more effect than anything I ever say. And then finally, I suggest you get role models. Maybe it's St. Ignatius, Maybe it's your mom, moms, dads. You have a lot of people who are looking to you as their role models. They probably could never get better ones than that. Maybe it's your best friend. And if it's none of those, I encourage you to look for your role models in the athletes of Special Olympics. They're running their races. They're giving their all. They're crossing divides. They're loving, it seems to me, over and over again, even in the face of scorn, that which has rejected them and trying again. And their example can change all of our lives, and yours can too. So I encourage you, Hoyas, we need the fierce determination to make us all better, with the radical conviction that the job you face right now in the world is too much for any force other than love. We can try every trick and every tactic known to humankind to heal our world. But our history and our destiny are all tied up in one truth. We can't heal what we don't love. So off you go, to work, to win, to rise to many hilltops, to create a new America, the possible. And I hope with all my heart to welcome those on the outside with love. Thank you and congratulations.